Hi, this is Tamara Monosoff, and I'm the founder of the training and mentoring website, tamaramonosoff.com. I hope you enjoy the 12-minute tutorial today on how to set the retail price for your product. It's so important that you get the pricing right from the beginning, so I hope this information serves you well, and let's get started.
Today I want to talk to you about margin calculators. One of the hardest things to do when starting a business, especially a product business, is to figure out and understand your pricing. In other words, after you make and manufacture your item, sell it to a retailer or distributor, how do you price it so that each of you makes enough money? The last thing you want to do is to successfully sell your item and then realize later that everyone is making money except for you. This is a surefire way to go out of business. This is why you need to look at margins, and that's why I wanted to show you how a basic margin calculator works to help you get started. As you may know, I don't like business jargon and I don't have a finance background, so I've had to learn the basics just like you. But before we get started filling out the margin calculator together, there are a few pieces of data that you will need on hand. You will need your per unit production cost from the factory. You're going to need your per unit cost for receiving and freight. And note that depending on how you're set up, these costs could very well be included. Or your freight could be included, but your warehouse receiving costs may not be. So make sure that you have a breakdown of each of these costs. And if you're producing your item overseas, you will need to have your import tariff costs. Now these too may be included in your freight costs or not, so you need to find out. If you don't know this fee, you can find it by visiting www.usitc.gov. You will also want to know your own margin goals. I don't like any margins below 50%. But margins below 35% would raise a question as to whether you are creating a viable and sustainable business. You should also know your retailer's margin requirements. This will vary by industry, product type, whether you're working with mass retailers versus boutique retailers, and whether there's a distributor involved or not. So this is a question to ask your buyers. Just ask them straight out. What is your margin requirement? And they'll tell you right away. If I don't have the specific information from a buyer, for planning purposes, I typically use a 50% margin, also referred to as a Keystone Markup. This is a 100% markup, or double your wholesale cost. In other words, if the retailer pays you $5 wholesale per unit for your item, a Keystone Markup would mean she will retail the item for $10. She's doubling the wholesale per unit price. Lastly, you can add in any promotional or sales discounts that you plan to offer. Now that you've gathered this data, let's look at the margin calculator together. So for just as an example, let's say that the production cost of your item is $4, and you can type in your per unit cost right here. And then let's say that your shipping and receiving cost per unit is an additional 5%, which adds 20 cents per unit to your item. And let's say also that your duty or tariff is an additional 3%. This will add 12 cents to your item. Therefore, your landed cost would be $4.32. So let's just say that you want to make 50% margin on your item. So look down here at the margin multiple estimate key. So if you want to make 50% margin on your item, you will need to put the number 2 right here. That will then double your landed cost, which is $4.32, totaling your wholesale with your 50% markup, bringing your cost to $8.64. Now, I like to add in a 5% discount, especially to retailers who are willing to pay right away. So that would then bring the cost down to $8.21 for your wholesale price. Now let's say that you want to now go directly to the retailer, to work with retailers without a distributor to begin with. So now let's take your cost of $8.21, and here it is. Then you know that we're assuming, if you don't know, for planning purposes, that your retailer wants to make 50% margin. So right here is the 50% margin. And as you can see, this is just doubling your wholesale price, bringing the retail price point to $16.42. Now the retailer won't probably want to sell it for $16.42 because they like to have it at $16.49 or $16.99 as they're selling them to their customers. The question you need to be asking yourself is this realistic? Will consumers pay $16.42 or $16.99, let's just say, round it up, for your particular item? So that's what you need to think about. Now let's say that we want to add a distributor into the pie, and they need their piece of the pie too. So let's go over here and find our cost to distributor. We're still at $8.21, which is our wholesale price. Now let's just say the distributor wants to make 33%. If you look down again at the margin key down at the bottom, you'll see for 33%, we'll want to put in 1.5 right here, making it 33%. So now, my cost to the distributor is $8.21. Then, if with their 33%, they will be adding on $4.10. So now the distributor will be selling it to the retailer for $12.31. So, the cost to the retailer is $12.31. Now, the retailer still wants to make 50% margin, which means that they're going to double the price. Right here, it's doubled. And then you'll see that then the retail price becomes $24.62. So once again, you need to ask yourself, wow, will the consumers actually pay $24.62? Let's say round that up and they sell it for $24.99. Will they pay it? And so you need to ask yourself that question. Also, another problem that's presented here when you put a distributor into the pie is that your price point for this retailer with a distributor is different than this price point over here from when you sell it direct. So you don't want to undermine your other retailers. You need to make sure that the price points that this retailer is getting is close to what this retailer is getting. Otherwise, that won't be fair because the one with a higher price point is not going to have as much success selling your item at this price. So let's say, in order to have a distributor, everyone's got to reduce what they want just a little bit. So let's see what we can do with the numbers. So let's say the retailer, they will be willing to take a little bit less. So let's type in there, let's say 1.8 and see what happens to our numbers. Okay, so let's say the retailer is willing to take 44%. And let's just type in here and see if our distributor would be willing to take a little bit less. Okay, bringing it down to 17%. And then look what's happening to our price point up here. Now the retail price point to retailer here with the distributor this is for the price point for the consumer, is $17.73, which is getting very close now to our $16.42. Now, if your retailer was demanding that they wanted a higher amount, you could play with it, and you might need to shave some of your 50% margin off of right here. So let's see what happens if we shave off a little bit of what we want, and we put in we bring this down in cost, and then we go up here and we give them back a little bit more, because let's say your retailer just was not happy with this. So we'll do 1.9. Okay, so now look what happened. The price point with working with a distributor and the price point selling you direct is almost the same, and they're probably going to round it up to $16.99 anyway. So now you've got price points that work, and it's only dropped down your costs a little bit. And everybody's been willing to shave off a few percentage points, but you can still, each of you can still make money this way. So you can see down here that by selling through a distributor, you had to lower your wholesale price to $7.39 from your original price point, but that now your numbers are actually working. And so if you were to sell this at $7.39 and you sold 5,000 units, your revenue would be $36,936 with a total gross margin of $336. If you are selling your item directly to the retailer, you'll see you're going to make more because you don't have a distributor to pay. And you'll sell, if you sold 5,000 units, your revenue would be $41,256, and your gross margin would be $19,656. So this is how a basic margin calculator works. I hope that you will jump in, put in your numbers, and see how you can make this work for you, the retailer, and distributors, so that you'll have a thriving and successful business. Thank you very much.